statues of the gods in Greek art. The Greeks believed in many gods. They believed that the gods ruled the heavens and that the natural environment was under divine control. And more than any other ancient culture, they imagined their gods in human form and conceived of them as a complex, multi-generational family group. Here's a very complex tree derived from Edith Hall's Greek mythology. They told stories about the gods' origins. Their creation story was a story of marriage and battle, which ended with Zeus overthrowing his father Kronos to become king of the gods. The Greeks told stories about the lives of the gods, their lovers, jealousy, their fights, their travels, and their successes and failures. And these stories were designed to explain each god's individual personality, their skills, their special skills, and the particular nature of their authority in the cosmos. For example, rain and thunder were thought to come from Zeus. Now, that is not to say that every time it rained, the ancient Greeks believed that they were experiencing a divine epiphany of Zeus. No. Rain was part of normality, and they probably didn't enjoy it as we do sometimes. But when rain declined to fall, they did fundamentally believe that it could be prayed for. They believed that winds could be summoned or averted by sacrifice, that an untimely earthquake or eclipse could cause a military campaign to be abandoned or delayed, and so on and so forth. The gods could restore order from chaos, provide a sense of security in an uncertain world, and fulfill the wishes and desires of communities and individuals. Securing the favor of the gods was thus extremely important for the Greeks, and they believed that they could attract the gods to come to them by appealing to their senses. But a god's coming to a place was not to be taken for granted. They used acoustic signals such as acclamations, ritual cries, ritual songs, praises, and prayers. Visual signals such as bright clothes, crowns, beautiful animals with gilded horns. They decorated altars, tables, and couches, made sacrifices that used olfactory signals appealing to the sense of smell, such as incense and wine. And they burned animal thighs on the altar to appeal to the god's hunger. And they removed from the place where the divine epiphany was expected anything that might hinder the god's coming, such as pollution, sources of pollution and discord. The primary aim of most ritual prescriptions and cultic regulations concerning purifications, sacrifice, order in sacred places, and the aesthetically pleasing staging of rituals and festivals of all kinds, from the stately civic procession. Here we see a fragment of the Parthenon frieze depicting the famous Panathenea, and of course more erotic, psychedelic processions like the Thiassos of the wine god Dionysus. All these things were designed to attract the divinity and facilitate the epiphany, the sighting, the meeting with the god. And in every Greek town, the temple was the central place, and the altar before the temple. But the most architecturally significant place was the temple for communication with the gods. The temple was the house of the god, and the most immediate, tangible, and thus powerful means of experiencing the power of the gods was through an encounter with their cult statue, which stood at the center of the temple building and visualized the god in a human bodily form. Before you is a votive relief, a gift to the gods that would have been displayed in the temple precinct, commemorating an important offering made by an individual to the god. And this votive relief depicts the encounter of the worshiper with the god, right? Worshippers process towards an altar where a being in human form, represented at a larger-than-life scale, stands. This is the god to whom their offerings will be directed. And what is interesting about this image of this being is that it's actually difficult to discern whether this image shows us a statue of the goddess or the goddess herself, right? This kind of blurring of material, physical statue with immaterial, beyond mortal divinity. Right? Greek and Roman gods took on mortal shape, and they could be materialized through visual imagery. Images did not simply represent the divine, though, for the Greeks. They could also render deities literally present before viewers' eyes. Anthropomorphic statues of the gods were treated as the gods themselves. They were washed and perfumed, anointed, greeted, offered food, touched, kissed, raped, and castrated. Women dressed them, men carried them in processions or carried them away. Enemies captured them. And all these dynamic interactions collapsed the distinction between image and deity. Through ritual, the world as lived and the world as imagined fused. They became the same world. And cult statues, as living embodiments of the god, as statues with vital functions, could also have lives themselves in the Greek in Greek thought. Right? They were imagined to have adventures. They traveled and were attacked, destroyed, burned, repaired, hidden, or buried. They had the power to arouse emotions and inspire actions in their viewers. And under certain conditions, they were filled with life in a very real sense. They moved, spoke, sweat, trembled, and healed. The statue of Zeus at his temple at Olympia seems to exemplify how a statue could be a living embodiment of the divine. The image, sculpted by Phidias, was celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The statue was moved to Constantinople, to one of the first kind of art museums in the 4th century after the fall of Rome, and later perished in a fire there. So we don't have it. And although the original is lost, many ancient writers wrote about it. It was colossal. Its total height was likely around 13.5 meters. The ancient geographer Strabo tells us that the statue was shown seated with his head almost touching the ceiling, giving the impression that if Zeus were to stand up, he would break through the roof. I mean, this is one powerful being represented in image here. It towered over and inspired awe in the viewer. Right? We were meant to understand that Zeus was not like us. And we are told by the travel writer Pausanias that Zeus's statue was made of gold and ivory attached to a wooden armature. These types of statues are referred to as chryselephantine statues, made from ivory and gold. And while the ivory material, which would have been used for Zeus's arms and legs and face, would have given Zeus's skin a more fleshly likeness, the gold material of his drapery and maybe even of his hair would have given an immaterial quality to Zeus's body. In the light's reflection off the golden surface, Zeus would appear radiant, and his form would seem to appear and disappear from our world, moving from our world into another. The god would seem simultaneously a part of our space, yet also entirely otherworldly. The viewer, worshiper would feel that he or she was encountering an exceptional, beyond mortal being who looked back at them. And this type of description matches with our other accounts of the power of the divine, or even coming into contact with the divine. The famous story of Zeus's love affair with Semele, the mother of Dionysus, when Semele, she was not to look upon the face of Zeus And in the unhappy circumstance that she did, she bursts into flames. Right, to even gaze upon the god would cause the flesh of the mortal body to disintegrate. Right, I mean, this is the power of the divine. And we usually associate statues with immobile and immutable matter. We use expressions such as, he stood like a statue. And such an expression is connected with the idea that statues are incapable not only of movement, but also of feeling and cognition. And the Greeks certainly had anxiety over whether inert matter, whether an image designed by mortal hands could ever really capture the essence of the divine. Right? Could any object really ever be the embodiment of the god, to be the god, equal to the god? And delivering a speech in front of the cult statue of Zeus, and here you see a potential copy of the cult statue in the Hermitage in Russia, right? In a speech that was delivered in front of the statue of Zeus at his temple in Olympia, the orator Dio Chrysostom attempted to justify why it is that Greek sculptors like Phidias would choose to represent the god in human form. Why do they do that? Right, now, Dio Chrysostom says, now, no sculptor or painter will ever be able to depict reason and intelligence as such, for we lack the capacity to perceive such things visually and remain uninformed about them. And because we humans have no idea how to express those abstractions, but nevertheless know they exist, we fall back upon the form and attribute to God a human body as a vessel of his intelligence and rationality. We do so because we have no model and we long for one. We seek to portray in a visible and perceptible way what cannot be depicted or seen. And we make use of symbolic function, which is preferable to the practice of those barbarians who are said to depict the gods as animals, a trivial and ridiculous decision. Here, at the end, he's making a jibe at the Egyptians who often represented their gods in a part animal, part human bodily form. So, yes, as Chrysostom says, yes, gods could take human form, and those forms could be sculpted into statues. Indeed, it was convenient to do so. But weren't gods also supposed to be somehow not mortal? The gods could be made understandable through their visualization, but also simultaneously beyond understanding. Here you see representation of a Doric temple depicted on a crater. This was a vessel the Greeks made in which they would mix water and wine. And on this vase, on this Greek vase, you see two mirroring images of Apollo. Inside the temple is a colossal statue of the god. You see his head almost touches, or does touch the roof. And he's shown with a bow and sacrificial plate. Outside of the temple stands another Apollo, this time holding a lyre. His name inscribed, you can see a part of it there, name inscribed above. The paradoxes of anthropomorphism, right, representing the gods in human form, conceiving of the gods in human form, are here plain to see and being commented on, right? We're looking at the giant image of the god standing before his imagined, albeit human-scaled, reality. In some ways, the two Apollos are strikingly similar. Both are shown naked, with slender body, each rendered from the same angle. But in other ways, the two are markedly different. Quite apart from their attributes, right, lyre and bow and sacrificial plate, note how the artist emphasizes a variation in style and surface, right? This darkened surface here, the more naturalistic, more, as we see people in life depiction of the Apollo outside the temple, right? These variations, right, so that the fluidity of the real Apollo's pose and turn of the head contrasts with the archaizing rigidity of the statue within the temple. Viewers of this image are faced with a mind-bending game of spot the difference, a divine Apollonian mirage, right? Which is the real Apollo? Would the real Apollo please make himself known? Right? At the same time, the two-dimensional picture makes a conspicuous problem of our criteria for judgment. Right? How are we supposed to know which one is which? Are they both images? Is one real, one's not? As itself a manufactured fabrication, right? This is a painting on a cup. Can the real Apollo embody the deity any more believably than the image Apollo next to it, right? It's an image of an image, and an image, right? Is anyone more real than the other? These are perplexing questions, right? And Chrysostom argues that to have any hope of understanding the divine, mankind requires a human vehicle to bestow the divine with the reverence it demands. Moreover, material images are needed. Nobody would argue in ancient Greece that it would be better for mankind not to display a statue or likeness of the gods. Images of the gods are required for the same reason that we need anthropomorphic forms, human forms, for imaging them. Okay? And no statue speaks better to the anxieties, controversies, and issues that could arise in the representation of the divine than Praxiteles' Aphrodite of Cnidus. Like many famous Greek sculptures, the original image in bronze is lost to us, and we can only attempt to reconstruct some semblance of the original form from a myriad number of Roman copies in marble. Pliny the Elder, the natural historian who died while documenting the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which destroyed Pompeii, gives us the most detailed account of the statue, right? He says that this was, Praxiteles was a really famous sculptor, but his most famous work was his Venus, his Aphrodite, which many people have sailed to Cnidus to see. Now, Praxiteles made two Aphrodites, Venuses, and he put them up for sale together. The other Venus took on a draped appearance, and because of this, the people of Kos preferred it, for they had first choice of the statues, even though they were both offered at the same price. The Coans thought this chaste, honorable, and proper. But what of the Venus that they turned down? This was taken by the people of Cnidus, and it achieved immeasurably greater renown. This one was way more famous. Later, Nicomedes, as king of the Coans, wanted to buy back the Venus from the Cnidians. He promised that he would discharge their entire state debt, which was very large, to buy it, right? But the Cnidians preferred to endure anything but this. And how right they were, for it was Praxiteles who made Cnidus famous, thanks to this statue. The shrine in which it stands is entirely open in construction, so that the effigy of the goddess can be seen from all sides, and the goddess herself condoned this, or so it's believed. She is equally wondrous from whichever way you look. There's a story that a man even fell in love with it after hiding by night. It is said that he slept with the statue, and that there's a stain to prove it, testimony to his lustful desire. Praxiteles' statue was clearly regarded as a watershed, right? Pliny tells us this was the first representation of the female goddess fully in the nude. Indeed, it was the first female nude in the history of Western art. A century earlier, women had looked like this, right? Their bodies were rigid, not lifelike. They stood like columns. They were clothed. They were the sites for decoration and adornment, right? They were basically bodies for the display of wealth, right? Particularly the celebration of their male family members' wealth. And just as an aside, I point out here the fact that ancient sculpture was not white in antiquity, but was vividly colored. And if you're interested in this phenomenon, please see the optional reading on the whiteness of ancient sculpture by Margaret Talbot, a piece in the New Yorker. And I should say about the Aphrodite, right, what's also interesting about this story it's not just that this statue's famous because it was nude, right? The Cohens turned down the nude virgin because they thought it was not proper to display a naked Aphrodite. And in so doing, the Canadians, in choosing this work, right, it's a testament to their avant-garde aesthetic judgment, that they were able to discern its beauty and appreciate its artistic innovation, right? The statue was celebrated as a work of art, right? By Pliny's day, 400 years after the statue's making, people would travel to an especially out-of-the-way Greek island to see it. It was a veritable tourist attraction. But the very reason for its fame, its nudity, also complicates its cultic function. The nudity and the way we are invited to engage with the statue in its setting, right? Pliny tells us, right, that you can see the statue from all sides, which invites us to forensically examine the body of the goddess from the front, from the back, from the sides. And some figures like Sigmund Freud and Michel Foucault and Lacan have been interested in an ancient passage by Pseudo-Lucian, which compares Aphrodite's backside to the boy Ganymede, the young Ganymede, who was the cupbearer of Zeus and a lover of Zeus, and was the example for which a discussion and comparison of opposite and same-sex love. Right. As a viewer, the statue positions us as a kind of voyeur. Right. We're privy, right, to seeing something that we otherwise should absolutely not see. Right. We should never see a woman fully naked, let alone the goddess of love herself. But Praxiteles, of course, coyly provides a narrative reason for the nakedness. Aphrodite has just emerged from the bath and is about to grab her robe in a gesture towards modesty, right? The statue, right, may have been too successful in making the goddess present, too lifelike in this respect, as the many anecdotes about men who ejaculated on this image and raped this image suggest. The statue had the power, amazingly, right, to transform what was religious devotion into sexual lust, blurring, right, the boundaries between religion and what we could, if we were in Victorian England, call the sexual perversion, right? And this paradox, right, of the how to represent something that is beyond our understanding, right? How to give it form, how to give the divine form, physical form, drives the entire history of Western culture. Debates about what the divine should look like and the legitimacy of visually figuring it have caused religious schisms and war, and remain rife in the 21st century. Take, for example, the criticism of a life-size naked statue of Christ made out of 90 kilograms of chocolate by Cosimo Cavallaro. Right? This idea of like the sweetness of the body of Christ, the kind of experience of religious ecstasy as compared to the aphrodisiac of chocolate. Right? Or the furor that erupted over a Danish set of cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Or even the 8-foot-high depiction of a black Virgin Mary encrusted with a lump of elephant dung and collaged bottoms from pornographic magazines, which outraged religious leaders and which Mayor Rudolph Giuliani referred to as sick stuff. Right? Representing the divine posed a true challenge to artists and raised real questions about the potential and limitations of representation, about the fundamental relationship of art and life, and the power of images. Thank you.